Brilliant. So we now have 20 minutes remaining before the breakout sessions started. So would like to invite, I think, of our panel speakers, maybe we only have John Riefel left. But if there's anybody else, please do join. And we've heard a lot from leaders in the field, key academics. So we thought it might be quite nice to instead hear from students. So those perhaps new to the field or kind of starting to explore it, to get your opinions. So we've asked a few students to join us, and please also, if there's anybody else that would like to join that's been following, please put your hand up or put a note in the chat, and we'll also add you to the discussion. So I think, is there anybody else joining? Let's just have a look. Yes, if you're interested, please turn your camera on just so I can see you, and I will add you to the chat. Nice. Brilliant. So I think there's a few more people coming. But it'd be really interesting to maybe get a student perspective on the kind of topics we've been discussing. Does this resonate with the kind of research you're doing? How do you connect these discussions? So for example, today we've had talked about consciousness. We've talked about, just the talk now we had on kind of this physical chemistry and these amazing devices. And this morning we touched on manipulation and planning. How does this connect to your research, and any takeaways from the conference so far? I don't know if anybody wants to kick us off.
Hello, maybe I can speak. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Hello. So it's a lot of good talks. I personally did the breakout room yesterday, and then it was also nice to hear like the details of the research in addition to the high level discussions on consciousness or embodied intelligence as a whole. I think for sure, like I'm just context, I'm a second year PhD student at EPFL, and we have a lot of discussion about embodied intelligence and life and so on. I think it gives you, so far, I think it gives you some grounding of direction of what to explore and what to think about. I've increasingly been convincing myself, whether it's through this community or just through my work, how you can use embodiment to help a robot be more functional or useful. But yeah, there's also a disconnect between the high level discussion that we have versus the actual hands-on implementation, working on robots, making them work, sometimes mostly making them not work. Yeah, so that's more of a student perspective, maybe.
John, actually, maybe coming to you on this, maybe John and Famia, how do we connect this philosophy also to the engineering? Or how do we bring these two together? And also doing it in a way that's accessible to students and also to an interdisciplinary community. Do you have any thoughts?
Me?
Yes, John, Famia, whoever, anybody actually that would like to contribute.
I'll punt to Fumia first to hear this.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So yeah, well, I mean, whatever research project we do, we need the bottom up and top down. Just and the bottom up, we need to know a lot of skills in hand, and we want to build things, what you can build, what you cannot build, something you need to know. But on the other hand, we also need a bit of top down view, why we are building it, right? If you can, and even for the top researchers around the world, we actually don't know. And that's a good thing to know from this kind of conference, right? If you look at all the papers in science, nature, science, robotics, they look all great, and they look exactly know why they're doing this. But just listening to them, they actually don't know. And this is the kind of good thing we learn in this kind of event. And asking, for example, Anil Seth, he's a great philosopher, he's talking about consciousness, but he also doesn't know so many things. And that was the kind of thing we can learn only from this kind of interactions. And I think that's one of the take-home messages from this kind of event.
No, very good point. John, do you have any follow-up? Also, I think you have an interesting perspective also working with bachelor students. And I think that gives you an interesting take on we need to make it accessible, but equally, and be happy with the fact that we can't necessarily explain everything or understand why we're doing things or what we're doing.
Yeah, I think one of the most exciting things about this conference and the people it attracts is how interdisciplinary it is, and how you really need to have a holistic perspective, informed by not just computer science, but also biology, cognitive science, neuroscience, philosophy, and really that is the definition of the liberal arts, right? That it's this synthetic, this integrative perspective, and so I think if there's a message for students, it's get out of your silos, make friends outside of your silos, and talk to strangers in strange fields. Who would have imagined that Mike Levin, this sort of genius of planaria biology and neuroethology, would team up with Josh Bongard, this genius of evolutionary robotics, and look at the kinds of things they're just absolutely mind-boggling that they're able to achieve together. And so I think all of the big accomplishments in this field are no longer going to be engineering accomplishments. They're going to be accomplishments of synthesis.
Very interesting point. Actually, and I wonder, just coming to our student and postdoc panel, where, in terms of your journeys, do you feel you are moving in an interdisciplinary way? Do you feel as you progress and as your research develops, it becomes increasingly interdisciplinary? And how has that helped you? And do you feel there is a need for more of that? Or are you happy with how you're going in your individual topics?
So maybe I can give some remarks about so these trends about biohybrids and bio-integrated systems is kind of raising the bar. The entry level is really high. We cannot really get inspired and just go and do the research, right? It's sort of a long path. If you decide to go, maybe you should start it I don't know, 10 years ago, right? I mean,
that's a good point.
Yeah. So this is I think for the regular students, for the regular PhD students, or the postdocs, or young professors, it's a bit difficult. If you've seen on the picture, the team of John Rogers, the team is pretty impressive, right? And that's why he has this nice output. And yeah, so this is one point. Another point is the IGMARS and perspective. Computer science, and it kind of goes along with the consciousness quite well. So it's also, I think, a good way to go. I mean, inviting people from those communities also really helpful, I think, because anyway, somehow we need to do this high-level control, right? The fast and the slow things. I think, this is my.
That's a really interesting perspective, that interdisciplinary is necessary, but certain disciplines are easier for us to target than others, aren't there? And maybe there is a little bit of strategy, especially as you say, a new researcher in this field. Which direction do you go to maximize output and learn as much, but within feasible bounds? What about kind of directions such as material science? I feel that's getting more accessible. Perhaps I think computer science is a good point. I think the accessibility is high. Biology is challenging just because of the equipment gap, the learning gap. But material science is an exciting direction that perhaps we need to be more aware of as kind of self-roboticists and kind of embodied intelligence researchers. Any thoughts on the different disciplines we should explore?
Yeah. Actually, I can take myself as an example. Now I'm a third-year PhD student, and basically I'm doing soft robotics. But for the recent studies, sometimes I think it is a natural process. So, for example, I'm doing a piano playing, but it is not only a robotics research, but sometimes I have to consider about the neuroscience and how we want to understand the motor patterns of the piano keystrokes. Then I naturally move to another, sometimes field of research, for example, psychology, how this kind of circuit pattern has been produced and what is the attempt behind this kind of pattern. And there is also the physiological researches and the neuroscience stuff. So it is like I am doing a research which was a combination of this kind of fields. And ultimately, it is super cool process, and I really like this process. And this natural process and also gives me some vision and opportunity to know many guys in other. So actually, last week I have several talks with the neuroscience stuffs, and I read a lot and learned a lot and enjoyed this process.
Mm-hmm. No, very, very interesting input, Yishang. Any other thoughts?
I actually have a question for John and for me, I guess, and Josie, I guess you can give your take on this one. So when we approach these interdisciplinary problems, do you think robotics should be posed as we try to give support and tools to explain some, I don't know, philosophy problems or biological problems, or on the other hand, like we should do more or less what has been done with the material science? So we take something that has been developed over some years and then we bring it into the robotics. What do you think is the most useful way of doing this collaboration between fields?
I can start. I think we need to do both, and I think it depends on the readiness of the technology and the specific problem. But I think it's very exciting that we can do both ways. We can develop new technologies and exploit and explore those, but also we can try and work with biologists to do biomimetic research and the like. And I think again, I think it's a bit strategic in terms of where the technology is and also where your interdisciplinary kind of partner is to find the right bridge. But I think, as for me, it says we need to make sure this top down and bottom up. And I think if we just do one or the other, we get very stuck, and I think it's overwhelming as well to some extent. So I think finding the right balance between these two, as an individual, as a research group, as a research community, is quite important. Any other thoughts? Oh, maybe Alexandra.
Hi, yeah, thank you for the great discussion. I'm a postdoc in Kirsten Peterson's lab at Cornell, and our answer to that question is that you don't need to do one or the other, but you need to do both in a feedback cycle, because if you're just trying to take from biology and put it in an artificial system, you might be misunderstanding the biology. And if you're just studying the biology, then of course you're not applying what you've learned. But when you combine them, I've seen it to really good effect create a feedback cycle where learning just about how the biology works, or the entomology in our case mostly, which is a very accessible form of biology collaboration, relatively. Yeah, it can come to really good effect. So Kirsten mentioned, instrumenting honeybees and creating these biohybrid systems that kind of came out of just studying honeybees just to see how they do what they do.
Really good point. That feedback loop is very nice. Actually, yes. Bill in the chat said, can you give an example? But I think the honeybees is a very nice one. Any other examples of this feedback loop you can think of where this two-way?
So currently we're studying termites in terms of foraging strategies. And so that's an embodied interaction, very much because they can't sense their target because they're underground before they find it. So by studying how these embodied interactions work, we're discovering different mechanisms for artificial collectives that just use these tactile interactions that are much more general than just imitating what termites do.
Really, really fascinating. Kai, you have your hand up.
Yeah, sorry. It might not be directly related to the topic of how to do the interdisciplinary research, but it's more a question about how to take on embodied intelligence in the whole research topic. So it's more a question, like when you have this topic of embodied intelligence, do you see the goal to be kind of using this framework to understand intelligence, to understand how nature or biology works, or more of a way of bringing better capable robots into the world? I guess the answer is a little bit of both, like from the discussions that we just had. But does anyone, like maybe Fumiya, Joji, John, have some specific ideas about this?
Maybe I can just start. So I think Josh Bongard gave a really good start of his talk, right? Like, probably most of the embodied intelligence is still dark matter. Maybe we just don't know 80%, 90% of embodied intelligence that we don't know. And this place, this community, this conference is a place where we really try and find out where is the borderline, or where are the borderlines that what we know and what we don't know. And embodied intelligence is mostly about what we don't know. And this is a very important process, especially for PhD students, because you need to find out what are the good problems, what are the bad problems. You need to find out problems, but most of the problems are actually not solvable, right? So we need to find the good unsolved problem, but still you can solve it within the time frame of PhD, right? So I think that's how I would look at. And there's so many things we learn, like what we don't know. And just by reading scientific papers, technical papers, we can know what we can do and what we know. But without this kind of conference, we don't know what we don't know. So I think that's that's my suggestion here.
I would also say, and coming back to Cecilia's talk yesterday, when we were talking about how do we prevent the decay of, for example, soft robotics as a field, and also I think the societal sustainability issues that we have at the moment, there is also a need to solve real problems. And even though perhaps we don't, as Fumiya says, we have this embodied intelligence maybe as black matter, even if we don't understand it, how can we use it to solve these pressing problems? So I think there is also a question of how can we use this to contribute to society, especially in times when there's such a significant need for it, which I think can help accelerate the research field, so make it sustainable, and also kind of give applications or meaning to what we're doing. And I think because there's so many opportunities to exploit embodied intelligence in this way, it's a nice direction to take it in terms of whether it's biohybrids, as we just saw with John, in terms of kind of the health monitoring, robots for sustainability, or just understanding how we learn and improving education. I think it's also important that we tie embodied intelligence back to the real world, back to society, and how can we actually make changes as well as doing fundamental research. Any other? So we have a couple of minutes left. Arsene.
Yeah, one last question. Like, what could be the action to boost this collaboration? Like, is there any way, like I mean, like sort of student competition or hackathon or something like that to boost the collaboration between this multidisciplinary research? Any grand challenge that we could just put there, and then so students can team up and just solve it for a short period of time. Maybe something big will start at this sort of collaboration.
Well, I know this might answer your question, but RoboSoft has a soft robotics competition. So there's one way to kind of build teams and solve problems. There are certainly well-identified grand challenges in soft robotics, but I think the best way to find collaborations at the kind of the graduate or undergraduate level is to come to these conferences. And I would say you know, the one downside of a virtual conference is we're not going out to the pub afterwards for a pint, which is where the real conference happens, especially for graduate students, right? I met Josh and Fumia and everyone else sort of in this generation. I can't believe how old we are now. At conferences, right? Just rubbing elbows at conferences. That's where you build up these networks of collaboration.
I think also there's some really interesting examples of collaboration out there. So I think just one example of a project that I think is really beautiful in the way they bring together different elements is this, I think it's called Project SETI, which I think is Harvard MIT collaboration. It's all about having to translate sperm whale calls. So they've got some people working on how do we get these devices and they could adhere them to the surface of whales. Some other people trying to understand the cognition process of whales. Others trying to really work on the hardware side, and others trying to work on the kind of encoding of these messages. And I think you're right, Asen. I think having a challenge like that, which is suitably grand that it can't be maybe solved in one PhD, but requires this interdisciplinary approach, is really nice. I guess another direction is to try and go down more of the startup route. Maybe that's another way to try and again promote interdisciplinary action between students. Any last thoughts, Fumia?
Yes, and you know, one of the biggest discoveries for me today was in one of the breakout sessions. We found really interesting research by Carlotta. Is she still there? I don't know, but she did a really excellent project on. Oh yeah, there we go. She's here. So she made a very simple simulation of a mobile robot with whiskers, but she explored basically morphological computation, morphology of whiskers. That can actually be used to measure the IIT, integrated information theory, which is basically what Anil Seth was talking about in machine consciousness. And the robotics, embodiment, and consciousness and everything somehow together came into one simple research platform. And this is still also, you can download this code from the internet, and anyone can actually run this code straight away. Carlotta, do you want to advertise your project?
Yes, thank you very much for the advertisement. So it's yeah, it's very simple setting where you have robots with simulated robots with only 2 binary variables as controller, so you can calculate the different measures for morphological computation and integrated information that I define in a information geometric way very easily. And so you can actually observe how they behave, the interaction behave with each other. And one thing that I might add here is that my PhD, so I'm in the 4th year now, is an interdisciplinary project from the beginning. And I think that's also a really interesting, but also a really challenging thing, because talking to people from vastly different fields takes a while. Even if you think you're talking about the same thing, you're not necessarily doing that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you know, this kind of reproducible research is very important, and I haven't tried it yet in my computer, but hopefully I can run it in my computer. Probably this is the first really simplest, you know, the simulation code you can do the consciousness research based on robotics, right? So that's a really interesting first step toward this very exciting direction of research.
Fantastic. I think that's a very nice way to wrap up and finish. So thank you very much to all the speakers, all the panelists. Thank you very much to our very last minute various students, postdocs, researchers who have joined us for that last discussion. So I think that concludes today's sessions, and I think the breakout rooms should be open. Just a reminder, we'll start again tomorrow, I believe at 9:15 again. So please do join the breakout rooms. Again, there's 2 different rooms. with about 7 or 8 talks in. So please do go and join those, and we'll just highlight and show this talks now. So thank you very much for joining, and we will see you all again tomorrow.